Welcome to YOUCANIC. Today here on YOUCANIC we have 2019 Chevy Trax with the 1.4 liter motor. And this is a four-wheel drive model, and so we are going to go over how you would remove the alternator. And to be able to remove this alternator, we're going to go over remove your tensioner, the drive belt tensioner on this vehicle. These are E13s and this is an E12, so you'll be able to loosen those. Right, so we need to take the tension off of the belt to be able to remove the belt off of the pulleys, so then that way we can remove this tensioner, and then we can have access to be able to remove the alternator and any other component. But this is in the way, and so we need to remove the tensioner. And also this tensioner is broken. This little metal tab is supposed to be attached here at the bottom, but it wears out and it breaks, and so we'll need to be putting a new tensioner in here. But you also got to be careful when you're taking this apart and taking the tension off, because this can potentially pop apart and kind of explode. So you see, we've got the tension off, but because there's no restriction here, that full spring mechanism wants to just bounce off. Good. So that came undone. Now, if this metal tab was connected like it's supposed to be, it shouldn't explode like that on you. So now we've got that undone. We're going to go ahead and undo this top one, and that way we can get this whole tensioner removed. So that's the removal of the tensioner to give you access to be able to remove the two bolts for the alternator and to be able to replace your alternator. So to remove our alternator, we have two bolts here. We've taken off the tensioner, and then we have the belt is sitting over here. And now we could remove these two bolts, but we're not going to have enough space to get this alternator out this hole. So what we're going to need to do is unhook the motor mount. So we need to remove the motor mount to give us space where we can drop the motor down or pull the motor forward to be able to get our alternator to come out through here. If you didn't have the four-wheel drive model, you most likely could wheel it down through here and get it out. Or if you wanted to take the axle out, but we're not going to go that route. We're going to just remove the motor mount and be able to lower the vehicle. So we have three bolts here on the bottom of the motor mount that go into the motor, and we're going to remove those. Those three bolts are they're a stretch bolt or a torque to spec, and you're only supposed to use them once, right? So these three bolts here, as well as the other three that bolt to it, you're supposed to replace those also. Now, we are going to go and see if we can remove this portion of the motor mount and the bracket as all one full piece to be able to remove that and save us from having to get another three bolts when we're going to need the three. But once we remove that motor mount, we are going to be able to lower the engine down a little bit, undo the two bolts for the alternator, and the electric connections on the back of the alternator we will undo, and then be able to remove the alternator. You also will want to support your engine with a jack and a block of wood between it, or use an engine hoist to hold the engine up from the top. Be able to raise and lower it, and to move it a little bit. So let's go ahead and start with taking off the components we need to gain access to the full motor mount, to remove that motor mount. So coming at from up top, we need to remove this air box, and so the whole air box will lift out. We're going to undo the clamp over here on this intake line, and then just remove this whole unit. So disconnect the mass airflow sensor connector, and then we're going to set that aside. Now we have a connection right here, and so we'll just take a screwdriver and push the push pin back, and we can push that out to the side. Now the air box is essentially free. It's just got some you would have also a little down pipe here, and that down pipe is broken or missing already, but this down pipe would come up and mount up to the top here. So now we can just pull this up. It's just held in by a little grommet on the bottom and the top, and now we have this up and out of the way. But we're just going to go ahead and undo this clamp over here, which is a 7mm, and be able to take off this whole thing to really get it out of the way. we got that undone and out of the way. Just gonna put a cover over this inlet pipe so that we don't have anything accidentally fall down in there. And so now we have access to the bolts that are on. And so these are size 18 to remove these 3 nuts here. These are size 15, but we're going to try to do it and leave these 3 in as one full unit and be able to take and pop this whole thing out. So I'm going to remove these 3 nuts here and then the 3 bolts onto the motor mount that go into the engine itself. So we got the top 3 undone, and now we will remove the bottom 3 that bolt into the motor, and then this whole unit, well, hopefully we can rock it out and remove the full unit as one whole piece. Now we have our jack down here all ready to support the motor, have it up, just touching the bottom of the motor, and so now be able to remove those 3 bolts. All right, we have those 3 bolts removed. Now should be able to go up top and be able to remove the full motor mount. Like I said, we have it supported and being held with the jack, and we can see that it's not moving, so that's a good sign. Okay. So we got the whole motor mount and bracket that mounts to the motor all out as one full unit. Did have to raise the engine up a bit to be able to get this to clear, but we are clear. You can just as easily take these 3 bolts out and it'll come out a little bit easier. So like before we do any work on the engine, the negative battery post has been disconnected, and so we cannot or should not be sparking ourselves. So we have 2 bolts here on the front that need to be undone, and then the alternator can be moved off. We have a bolt and an electrical connector on the back of the alternator that we will need to be undone, but we should be able to undo these 2 bolts, move this enough, and then be able to reach around the back and undo that electric connector. One is just a push connect, and one is an actual nut that is from the battery cable, or for the battery power feed. Okay, so we'll remove these 2 bolts and we'll go to that point. Now, a little bit of pry bar action to be able to get that alternator to come away from the engine. Okay, so we have the alternator essentially free of the engine. And now we will need to So it's able to spin the alternator in, and so now this is the one connector that we need to undo, and then there is a 13 millimeter bolt generally on top here, or nut. We'll undo that and undo that, and then all the electrics should be free of our alternator, and then we'll be able to position it and be able to get it out of there. We have the electric connector undone. The size 13 bolt has been removed. And now it's just a matter of finding the right combination to be able to spin that alternator out. I don't feel we have enough space right here, so we're going to try by lowering the engine and pulling it out through the bottom. So we've lowered the engine as far as we can. And now just being able to twist that. And now we have removed our alternator from our vehicle. So now we can go ahead and install our alternator. It's the same concept with the new one, or if you removed it for other work on the vehicle. So we have the motor mount has been undone and the motor has been lowered down. You still have it supported on your jack, and so it's lowered down so that we have enough space to be able to slide our alternator up inside there. One other thing, when we get it up in there, kind of get it in the orientation the way it's going to be, so we know where that electric and how it's supposed to hook up onto the electric post here, so that we don't hook it up and then it's like all spun around in the wrong direction. Okay, so if you take your alternator with the side, it works quite easy with the two sides that have the bolts on it that attach the alternator. You bring those flush up here to the top part of this frame and spin it. You'll be able to slide this alternator up in there quite easy, and then be able to get it spun pretty good into the orientation of where it needs to go. Like that. And now we can get the bolts started in there, and then we do have enough space to reach back in there and tighten on that bolt, the nut and the bolt and that electric connector. All right, we have the two bolts started. Before I get too carried away, I'm going to make sure that I can reach back here, be able to put the electrical connector on, connect the 13. Okay, so the nut for the electric that goes to the battery is installed and tight, and then we have one electric connector on the bottom. Just line up and press and snap that into place, and that is in place. Now we'll tighten these two bolts that hold the alternator on. So now whether you're doing it from up above, which there's ample space, or just doing it from down here, we still just need to tighten these two. They are the E14 style. And so we just Alright, so the alternator is in place. That would be the install of your alternator. And now, you recall, you had to remove the tensioner, and we have a new tensioner to put on there because the old one was in pieces. And so now we can install the tensioner. So that is the install of your alternator on this 1.4 liter Ecotec Chevy Trax. And here's our new tensioner with everything is all one piece, and it comes with a brand new bolt for up top, so we don't need to reuse the old one. And so we can just put that on there and line this up in the bottom. And we have a pin in here that we're going to leave in there until we put the belt on. And then that way, when we put the belt on and we release this tension, then we'll pull the pin, and that will put the tension onto the belt. So you will reuse the bottom bolt, which is the E12. So we have the bottom bolt tight. This top bolt up here is a E14. We'll make that nice and tight, and then to be able to back this tension off, to be able to remove this, we would put a nut or a socket on here with a ratchet and be able to turn that back, and then we can route our belt around where it needs to go, but we will leave this alone until we get the belt on. So the belt, we have the rib side go around the water pump, around the AC pump, around the crankshaft, smooth side around this tensioner, rib side around the alternator, and we come back up here. And so it's a fairly straightforward routing. So we'll get it wrapped around here, release the tension on our tensioner. This is a 15 millimeter bolt now. It was an E14, I think, but the new tensioner came with just a 15 millimeter bolt on it. So we'll be able to put a 15 millimeter on here and be able to turn clockwise, and that will back the tension off so that we can get the belt wrapped around here. And so that's the orientation that we need to wrap our belt around to get it installed on our vehicle. So we're going to put the new one on. And of course, you know, that new one, they're going to be a little bit tighter and tougher to get on than what the old one was, because the old one has stretched a little bit over time. So we're going to go wrapped around the pulleys that we can. And set into the grooves. And now we need to release the tension on that tensioner to be able to get this to go around the AC one. We have that belt around all the pulleys, set inside the ribs, all inside where they should be. And now we would be able to pull this pin out due to the tension being released and being held tight by the tensioner. And you can keep this pin for future times while working on this or other vehicles where you need to use that. And so that would be the install of your serpentine belt. Then next you would install your motor mount and be able to tighten that in place and put the other components back on that you need to get this motor mount to clear the side of the fender. So we've got that over it a little bit. Just need to pull these bolts back. So we have it down in there. The motor mount is going to be on the inside of all of the belt. So the front and the back side will go on the inside of the belt. Okay. So we snug that one up over there. We will torque them to spec. They're torqued to 46 foot-pounds. All three of these that go into the motor. So we've got those two. The third one, once we drop the motor down onto this component here, onto the fender or the frame, then we will be able to insert the bottom one. So we need to bring our motor up a little bit, pull it to the front because it's shifted a little bit to the back. And you'll keep your hands clear of the pinch points as you're lowering down. And so now it is sitting on the frame. We have 3 nuts that are going to go up on the top here, and they get tightened down to 50 foot-pounds. So we have 36 foot-pounds into the engine and 46 foot-pounds in the engine and 50 foot-pounds here to the frame to tighten the bolts. They're size 15 millimeter bolt head to be able to put them into the side of the motor, and then I believe this is 18. And everything seems to be actually right aligned with where it was mounted originally, so that's a good sign. But like I said, so that's the install of your motor mount. So once you've tightened, torqued the bolts on the engine side, 46 foot-pound, torque these to 50 foot-pound, then the last thing you'll need to do when you're finally done with all this is just be able to set in the air box with the tube that comes to the intake.